dramatic delay. Reaction from the White House and Capitol Hill as Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh prepares to testify next week on allegations of sexual abuse. Added authority. Pope Francis gives bishops more power to advise him on church affairs. We're at the Vatican. Prayers for peace. A representative from the Holy See helps open the United Nations General Assembly. And a senior citizen's big night out. How an 87-year-old woman in Chile uses a weekly ritual to help those most in need. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, September 18th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Tonight, Supreme Court showdown. The Senate Judiciary Committee schedules a high-stakes hearing, but the California woman accusing Brett Kavanaugh of sexually assaulting her in high school has not yet agreed to testify. This bombshell allegation delays the committee vote for the president's nominee. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi joins us now. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Republicans say they invited both the accuser and the judge to testify Monday. Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley says he's still waiting for a response from Christine Blasey Ford. If Ford does appear, the hearing is sure to be heated.
Judge Brett Kavanaugh could soon hear from his accuser.
If these allegations are true, then I could not vote. I think it would be a disqualifying factor. That's just the way it is. I think that it's important. To do otherwise would send a horrible message to young men and women across this country.
On the fence, senators from both parties say they'll look for answers at next week's public hearing, including Alaska Republican Lisa Murkowski.
I think that we should allow for the committee to assemble, for the individuals to be heard, and then, in fairness, we should make our determination.
Senator Marco Rubio, a Catholic, tells me he wishes this allegation would have been brought up earlier.
If the allegation against Judge Kavanaugh is true, does that disqualify him?
He has strongly denied it, and he has the right, should be given the opportunity to be heard. The allegations are very serious, very substantial, and need to be fully listened to as well.
Psychology professor Christine Blasey Ford says Kavanaugh tried to undress her during a party in the early 80s when they were both in high school. Ford wrote Democrat Dianne Feinstein in July. The senator says she didn't bring it forward to protect Ford's privacy.
I respect the fact that she respected the repeated requests for confidentiality from Dr. Ford.
Are you disappointed it wasn't brought up in that setting where usually these allegations?
I just told you you're going to have to ask Senator Feinstein
but yourself,
about that.
Are you disappointed?
I respect that Senator Feinstein chose to honor the repeated request for confidentiality from Dr. Ford.
Democrat Doug Jones suggests independent counsel ask the questions next week. Top Judiciary Republican Chuck Grassley told conservative talk show host Hugh Hewitt it's possible they could have a female counsel ask questions. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi asking the tough questions. Thank you, Jason. Meanwhile, Kavanaugh was at the White House for a second straight day, but again did not meet with President Donald Trump. The president said he was totally supporting Kavanaugh and rejected calls for the FBI to investigate the accusation against him. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. President Trump agrees with the Republican lawmakers you just heard from. He thinks Democrats should have brought up these allegations much earlier.
This is a terrible thing that took place, and it's frankly a terrible thing that this information wasn't given to us a long time ago, months ago, when they got it. They could have done that instead of waiting till everything was finished and then all of a sudden spring it. But that's what the Democrats do. That's what they do. It's obstruction, it's resist, it's whatever you have to do.
President Trump was asked about Judge Kavanaugh during an Oval Office meeting with the president of Poland. The two leaders later appeared together at a joint press conference in the East Room of the White House. And again, Judge Kavanaugh became a central topic.
I feel that the Republicans, and I can speak for myself, we should go through a process because there shouldn't even be a little doubt. There shouldn't be a doubt. Again, they knew what they were doing. They should have done this a long time ago, 3 months ago. Not now.
President Trump says he feels terrible that Judge Kavanaugh and his wife and daughters have to go through this. He says Kavanaugh is a, quote, great gentleman. Lauren?
Does President Trump think the allegation against Judge Kavanaugh will delay his confirmation?
The president says he's okay with a delay so senators can get to the bottom of this. He says we want everybody to be able to speak out and speak up. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. All 8 dioceses in Pennsylvania were named in a lawsuit filed yesterday. It was filed by parents of children in Catholic schools and survivors of clergy abuse. They want church leaders to release information that was redacted from the state's bombshell grand jury report. The lead attorney says the group wants transparency, not money. The Diocese of Fort Wayne, South Bend, publishes the names of priests and deacons who have been credibly accused of abusing minors. Bishop Kevin Rhodes says it's important for victims to see the names made public. Rhodes reiterated the diocese's commitment to protect children and young people, and Rhodes is now the Bishop of Fort Wayne, South Bend. New developments of sexual misconduct in Spain. The Vatican has suspended a priest in the northern part of the country for 10 years over allegations he abused children. Father Jose Ramos will serve the ban in a monastery. The alleged crimes occurred 3 decades ago. The case cannot be taken to court because the statute of limitations expired. And the Pope will give bishops more authority when it comes to advising him on church affairs. New rules reforming the Synod of Bishops were released today. The Synod is the body of bishops established 50 years ago to advise the Pope on problems facing the church. Vatican correspondent Juliet Lindley joins us from Rome. Juliet, tell me the impact of these new rules. How are they going to change the authority of the Synod?
Lauren, the Holy Father wants to expand the authority of the Synod and increase the involvement of the people of God and promote dialogue between the bishops and the Pope. Now, that means the Synod of Bishops will remain a body that advises the Pope. And according to the new rules, Lauren, the final document of a Synod might be considered part of the ordinary magisterium, but only with the express approval of the Pope. Now, another novelty of these new rules is what they call, is that they're calling for a process of consulting the faithful before a synod. That would increase the voices of the laity. Francis has already been promoting that idea, as was seen during the 2014 and 15 synods of the family, and also for the upcoming Synod on Youth.
So that Synod on Youth starts in 2 weeks. What changes can we expect to see?
Lauren, certainly the inclusion of the Vatican's head of communication, a layperson, as we know, Paolo Ruffini, that'll be a first. And also, Cardinal Lorenzo Baldisseri, the General Secretary of the Synod, has issued an open invitation to young people to come to the Vatican during the Synod on October the 6th and to have their say. Now, the Pope himself and the bishops will be there to listen, Lauren. So for some background, though, 53 years ago, Blessed Paul VI decided to establish the Synod of Bishops as a continuation of the Second Vatican Council. Now, it had just wrapped up then, and today the Holy See is calling this a new expression of that vision, which is firmly rooted in tradition, though, Lauren.
When I was there last week, Juliet, the sex abuse crisis was very much on everybody's mind, and we did report after report talking about it. Now, I understand that you are hearing from a key Vatican leader dealing with the crisis. Tell us about that.
Lauren, Archbishop Charles Scicluna of Malta is telling our news partners, the Catholic News Agency, that documents are not enough and it's time for action. He said the church needs to make communities aware of the sad phenomenon of abuse, as he called it, and to involve everybody. He said the extraordinary meeting of bishops has been called for next February was a decision made by the Pope's Council of Cardinals that advises him, but it's also a response to people's expectations for action. He finished by saying we need to renew our commitment to child protection within the church, Lauren.
Juliet Lindley, thank you. EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent.
Thank you, Lauren.
The Vatican appears near to an agreement with China over the appointment of bishops. One church leader who played a role, Archbishop Theodore McCarrick. He traveled to the communist country at least 8 times and spoke publicly in favor of the deal. McCarrick resigned this summer from the College of Cardinals following allegations of sexual abuse and harassment. And for more on this story, including a review of several of McCarrick's trips to China, visit our partners at catholicnewsagency.com. An Italian priest has been kidnapped in Niger. It occurred near the country's border with Burkina Faso. A government spokesman says police are investigating. The area is home to Muslim extremists who previously have kidnapped and killed officials. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and South Korean President Moon Jae-in hold their third summit this year. The two leaders are trying to bring peace to the region. It was the first time Kim greeted anyone at the airport as North Korea's leader. Syria shoots down a Russian military plane, killing 15 people on board and setting off a blame game. Syria says it used anti-aircraft missiles yesterday to ward off an Israeli attack. Russia says it's blaming Israel, saying the plane was caught in the crossfire. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu blamed Syria for the attack. A lot more coming up on EWTN News Nightly. The Trump administration announces the number of refugees it will allow into the country. And a State Department official updates us on whether aid is reaching persecuted Christians in Iraq. The United States is slashing the number of refugees it will accept. The new total, 25% lower than the current 45,000 limit.
We propose resettling up to 30,000 refugees under the new refugee ceiling, as well as processing more than 280,000 asylum seekers.
The update provokes criticism from human rights groups. The Trump administration insists it is committed to providing sanctuary to people fleeing the world's danger zones. In 2017, the Obama administration capped new refugees at 110,000. The plight of refugees is one of the key issues world leaders will address over the next 2 weeks. They're gathering for the United Nations General Assembly in New York City. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee spoke with the Holy See's UN ambassador, who is urging diplomats to pray ahead of their meetings.
Catholic leaders join people of different faiths in worship. Every year, the Pope's personal representative, Archbishop Bernardito Auza, welcomes diplomats from around the world to the Church of the Holy Family in Manhattan, just a block away from the United Nations.
Its purpose is really to thank God for what has been achieved, what has been done during the previous general session of the General Assembly, and to invoke and to beseech His assistance, His grace for the new session of the General Assembly.
The Archbishop tells me the parish has hosted the annual prayer service for 3 decades. The church's pastor, Father Gerald Murray, says it's a vital part of their vocation.
God's presence is invisible, but the church is the visible extension of God's mission in the world. So we try to bring that to everyone. And all religious beliefs, people of all religious beliefs are welcome here, precisely because this is the house of God for all nations.
They pray for a common theme, the dignity of every human person.
All the big questions like the environment, like migrations and refugees, all of these have been perpetual questions across centuries, if not millennia, for the Catholic Church.
One of the biggest questions, how to promote peace in war-torn areas, like in Colombia.
The peace process in Colombia.
Archbishop Luis Castro Quiroga is the former head of Colombia's Bishops' Conference. The group helped to open dialogue between the government and FARC, a rebel group dissolved after decades of fighting.
We have to open the country, the arms, the acceptance to those people that want to change their lives from guerrillas to civilians and positive civilians.
The Archbishop urges diplomats to remember values like justice and mercy as they tackle some of the biggest global challenges. In New York City, Wyatt Goolsbee, EWTN News Nightly.
A State Department official says he is optimistic religious freedom issues will remain in the forefront of the Trump administration's plans. Knox Thames, the special advisor for religious minorities in the Near East and South Central Asia, wrote in a blog post, "Our work has only just begun. Persecution on account of religion or belief remains a daily reality for millions around the world." Joining me now from the State Department is Knox Thames, special advisor for religious minorities. Knox, welcome back to the program.
Great, thanks. It's great to be here.
Under President Trump's orders, USAID is directing aid, $60 million worth, to persecuted communities in Iraq. And we hear from Christians on the ground that it's only trickling in. Can you give us an update on the delivery of that aid? Has it reached Christians?
It's starting to get there. This is a major priority of this administration. It's something we've been focused on for quite some time, but it is a very difficult and challenging environment. There are independent militia groups in and around many of the traditional Christian and Yazidi towns that create a security risk, but we're doing everything we can to see that the groups that need it the most, the communities that suffered genocide, the Christians, the Yazidis, and others, are getting the aid they so desperately need so that their communities can continue to exist in northern Iraq.
We heard from an advocacy group in defense of Christians, and it says the aid could be too little too late. What is your response to that?
Well, time will tell. It's a very challenging environment, like I said. The Christians live in a fragile existence. Their numbers have dropped precipitously over the past decade, and the genocide that ISIS attempted forced even more to flee. But we want to try to recreate conditions where Iraqi Christians, Yazidis, and others feel confident they have a future in their ancestral homelands. Another component we're focusing on is also security, to make sure that these minorities can play a role in protecting their towns and villages so that when they go to bed at night, they know that someone from their community is standing watch.
Last week, Vice President Pence spoke to the head of Iraq's Kurdistan region, where many Christians live. And the two leaders agreed to work closely together to help the persecuted return to their ancestral homes. ISIS has largely been eradicated, so what are the needs on the ground? Is it just a matter of jobs and infrastructure?
That's a big part of it. I was looking at the statistics provided by the Nineveh Reconstruction Committee and Aid to the Church in Need, and they're showing that about 40% of the pre-ISIS population in northern Iraq have returned home, and about 40% of the homes have been rebuilt. So that's positive, but there's a lot more to be done. So this emphasis that the Vice President has initiated to surge resources to these communities, we're doing everything we can to make sure they're getting to these towns and villages, to see a revitalization of economic life, of religious life, but also, again, security is going to be an important part of this conversation, and it's a conversation we're having with the Iraqis, with the Kurds, and it's something we're going to do our best to see through.
All right, thank you for that update. Knox Thames, Special Advisor for Religious Minorities at the State Department.
Thank you.
Stay with us, more to come. Up next, a pro-life leader updates us on the attempts to stop a government contract buying baby body parts for research. Plus, how a senior citizen's Wednesday night ritual is helping those in need. A lawsuit seeking to end state support for faith-based adoption agencies in Michigan will continue. A federal judge late last week denied a motion to dismiss the case. It challenges funding for religious adoption agencies that do not place children with same-sex couples. A group of 85 lawmakers expresses concern to the FDA over a government contract to purchase baby fetal body parts. In a letter sent yesterday to the head of the FDA, the group says, quote, "Unborn children are not commodities to be bought and sold." It requests a response by October 1st. The contract was awarded last July to Advanced Bioscience Resources, or ABR, for nearly $16,000. Joining me now via Skype from San Francisco is Lila Rose, founder and president of Live Action, a national pro-life organization dedicated to ending abortion. Lila, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Lauren.
When you were on with me last month, we talked about this government contract with ABR, Advanced Bioscience Resources, to buy baby body parts for research use. Now, do you think that this letter from 85 members of Congress to the FDA commissioner will apply enough pressure to end this contract or others like it?
It should, Lauren, because look, the head of Health and Human Services, which oversees the FDA, is Secretary Azar, who was appointed by President Trump. And President Trump and his administration have said time and time again that they are pro-life and that they will not tolerate policies that promote abortion, which would include buying aborted baby body parts, helping create that market like they are doing now with ABR that the FDA is doing. So it should work now that this has come to light and is being pointed out. And if it doesn't, then I think groups like Live Action, Susan B. Anthony list, other groups need to call on serious changes in personnel at some of these federal agencies that are effectively resisting the administration's positions on life.
Representative Chris Smith, that's a Republican from New Jersey, points out in that letter that there are, quote, more ethical methods of medical research. Why do you think the government is continuing to do business with ABR?
There have been experimental funds set up and through National Institute of Health, through other government bodies for years now that want to experiment on the bodies of aborted children. I mean, this is something that has been a popular part of the pro-abortion agenda, really saying that we can actually use abortion for good. Look at all these cures and these solutions that can come from this, when really there have been no cures found from using embryonic stem cells from children that are just embryos that are then killed for their cells. And there have been many cures that come from adult stem cell research or using umbilical cords. So that evidence is out there, and I think that this is really a remnant of the Obama administration and other administrations that were not careful in life, and it needs to be fixed. We need to have Secretary Azar and the FDA stop any policy that would buy aborted baby body parts, which then continues the market for abortion.
Your organization, Live Action, works tirelessly to educate people, as you are now, and inform people about pro-life issues. But you say Twitter is making it harder for you to share your message. Tell us what you've experienced.
Sure. Well, for 2 years now, Twitter, which is one of the largest social media companies and claims to allow all groups to represent their beliefs and their convictions and ideas on their platform, has been banning Live Action from doing any advertising on the platform, while they still allow Planned Parenthood to advertise. So they're blatantly banning pro-life speech on the platform from being advertised.
How do you plan to combat this kind of what you call censorship?
The key thing is awareness, Lauren. We're trying to get people to go to our website, liveaction.org. We want to get out the message on other platforms, on YouTube, on Facebook. Ultimately, it's awareness, because we need to show that Twitter is actually misleading their users. They're saying they do not ban conservative or pro-life viewpoints, but that's exactly what they're doing in the case of Live Action.
Lila Rose, thank you for joining us, founder and president of Live Action.
Thanks for having me, Lauren.
Finally tonight, an 87-year-old woman has fed the homeless in Chile every week for the past 40 years. Elena Doner is part of Christ's Home. It's a Catholic group helping the poor in Santiago, Chile. It was founded by Saint Alberto Hurtado. Doner says she promised to continue serving people just as he did. She promised it to Saint Hurtado. She says it brings her joy to help others in need. Doesn't it always bring joy when you're helping someone else? It makes you get out of your own head, right? That does it for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.